Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Adaptive Cards community call for August 2021. In today's community call, we're going to talk about some contribution guidelines. We're going to announce version 1.5. We're also announcing Teams support for version 1.4, and we will end the call with a small Q&A session. We might not have answers to all the questions, but if you guys shoot us an email at my email is jproca@microsoft.com. We can follow up with any questions that we don't have answers to, or we can take the questions during the Q&A and follow up that way as well. In the past, people have mentioned that they can't see the chat. So Raul on the call, he's another PM working on Adaptive Cards as well, has created this handy link, aka.ms/community-call-chat. If you can't see the chat, but you can see the recording, go ahead and visit that link and we can add you manually. All right, so the first talking point we had is a new addition to our resources. So in the last month, we released contribution guidelines for our Adaptive Cards repo. We expanded on the ones we currently had and added some more sections on the whole process for all the way from when you have the feature spec for the feature that you would like to add, to the pull request part, to the review process and how that's like. We don't have a direct link to this yet, but if you go into our GitHub repo and scroll to the very bottom, there'll be a section that says contributing in bold, and then there'll be a link with blue text that says contributing. Click on that and you should be able to see all the steps required to contribute to the Adaptive Cards repo. This will help establish set guidelines for how we're looking to take on features for Adaptive Cards and pull requests coming either from internal teams or external contributors. Next up on the list is our announcement for version 1.5. Our team is looking to have a preview build of version 1.5 around September. No set date yet, but we're planning for September as of now. Some parts of what this will include is Input.ChoiceSet search and filtering. So if you have some inputs and you type something in, you'll be able to search and filter the list. This comes also with Input.ChoiceSet autocomplete to complete when you have a large list of choices and you're able to find the one that you want. And we're also looking to improve table layout. So in the past, it was difficult to sort of align the height of your columns with your rows, and we're looking at some improvements in that space for version 1.5. Next up, we will talk about team support for version 1.4, and I'll hand it off to Steven if he is in the call.
Yep. Hey, JP. Yeah, good to meet everyone. Quick intro on my part. I'm the PM on the Teams platform side of things, so working with the Adaptive Cards teams to support Adaptive Cards on Teams. So just like to announce that as of now, we're supporting up to version 1.4 of Adaptive Cards here. So currently there is limited support. It's partially supported at this point. So for all of bot enabled cards, so they contain all of the goodies as part of v1.4. But we are now actively working on supporting that through user sent tabs cards and supporting those experiences as well. So that's the current update, and yeah, I'm just glad to meet all of you as part of this community.
Thanks so much, Steven, for that. And would you be able to explain a little more on what these bot cards are that you're mentioning?
Yeah, so essentially if anyone in the developer community builds out a hosted bot experience that sends cards on Teams, those now have the ability to send these newest v1.4 cards. However, for some of the user sent cards, so think message extensions or within the tab experiences, those currently don't support the Adaptive Cards 1.4.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Steven, for that presentation, and welcome to the community call.
Thanks.
Perfect. And for our last section here, we have our Q&A. Feel free to ask questions related to Adaptive Cards or anything you have in mind. I'm going to tab out of the presentation and try to see the chat. And feel free to either type in your question in the chat or unmute and we can listen to that as well. As I mentioned in the beginning, we might not have the answers to these right now, but we will be sure to follow up if we don't.
Hi, this is Jasjit. I have a question for Steven. Is there any specific documentation or guidance that tells us what's supported via adaptive cards for Microsoft Flow with Teams integration? Because that's where we do a lot of work with our customers these days, and it's still, we find out issues by hit and trial and understanding what's happening where and try different versions and see what feature works, what doesn't. If that can be documented, that would be really great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's something that we're actively working on. It's just improving the documentation all up. So I think that is one of the gaps right now that we have is within the MS Flow integration with Teams. So funny enough, like earlier today, like we've been getting calls about that as well. So yeah, I think it's noted at this point. We're trying to revamp the documentation as we're supporting the 1.4. So stay tuned for updates on that.
Thank you. Yeah, I just closed the ticket. The React versus Angular was causing some issues, but it got resolved.
All right, glad to hear.
And while we're on the topic of documentation here, that's something that I'm also looking to improve on the adaptive card side as well. Just any gaps that people are facing, feel free to call them out and we can take note of that. If there are any pain points or gaps in the documentation that you've experienced, we can definitely make note of that and I can put it on the list for improvements that we have planned.
Steven, for those of us that do have the doing stuff where it is like, hey, my notification kicks off of that Power Automate using the adaptive card JSON to an MS team, either channel or to the person, that's still to hold off to use the 1.4 until we get everything kind of worked out for that platform, then still use the 1.2, 1.3.
Gregory, this is on Teams, correct?
Correct.
So sorry, your question was the 1.2 and 1.3 cards, sorry?
So right now you're saying you've got the version 1.4. However, for most of us, like Joseph said, like us power users, we're doing Power Automate to run the notification to a person in Teams in the chat or through a channel. And right now, there's a lot of things that it won't do because you're still having to use the 1.2 version. So I just want to make sure, like, hey, are we able to jump to the 1.4 or are we still going to just need to hold off before we make that leap yet?
So are you saying, are you able to make that jump if you're using MS Automate to send those cards, right?
Correct. Yep. Using Power Automate to send it to Teams and in a chat or channel.
So I believe Power Automate uses the bots, so they should be able to support the 1.4 scenarios.
I can tell you it doesn't work for me. I've been trying to do that for a while.
Yeah, I can confirm that still doesn't work. We're stuck with 1.2 so far. So that's why I was saying if that documentation or any guidance can be provided what's supported specifically from Flow to Teams, that would be really good.
So a quick question here. When you guys say it doesn't work, at what level does it not work? Does it not work as the card is received in Teams? Does it not work as Power Automate is not able to send it? Does it not let you specify a card with version greater than 1.2? What exactly is the failure?
The last I checked, the last run that I did, it told me that this version is not supported.
And that's Power Automate telling you that?
Correct. Power Automate gives that output.
Correct. Yeah. So it'll kick back that the JSON's, not right.
Okay. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. So that's why usually when I'm in these monthly calls is like a lot of stuff that is the focus on the adaptive cards is more from, hey, I'm using it like maybe in virtual agents or something that an IT person's building. But there's a lot of us that is probably on your guys' call that we're power users. And so the only thing that we're really doing is, hey, I'm sending the notification with that Power Automate, send to a chat or send to a team channel. So that's where we really would like to see, like, hey, get some of that fixed, because it's causing where we're not like equal. So
right, we're gonna have to sync up with Power Automate, making sure, because apparently what you're saying is that there is some sort of validation that's done on their side, which prevents any card that doesn't have the right version from even being sent in the first place. So we're going to have to work with them on lifting that limitation on version 1.2 now that Teams supports greater versions.
So I don't think it's a validation error. For me, it's when after it tries to send, the error message comes back from Teams.
Ah, okay. So that's actually the question I was asking. Whether it's,
right.
I was trying to determine whether it was a Power Automate issue or if it was a Teams issue. So if it's a Teams issue, it's a little less complicated because we own everything. Okay, we'll look into that. Thank you.
Is there a bug that you filed for this, or is there a bug that you could file? So that way we can investigate and like have a better result on that.
I personally have tried, but I will say the Teams connector for Power Automate is still in beta.
Got it. Thank you for raising those concerns, everyone. We'll definitely follow up there. And if there are any links to existing bugs or anything you filed on that, please be sure to send that in the chat and we can take a look further there. Do we have any other questions?
David had mentioned this in the chat. I just want to call it out because not everyone can see it. We are also introducing a new table element. I'm not sure if it's part of the preview build of 1.5 or it'll be introduced a bit later, but with that, you won't have to deal with like multiple stacked column sets to like emulate tables. And he says that the new table element also works well with accessibility software. So hopefully that'll help people create better layouts using adaptive cards.
So it's Gareth here. Just to sort of add to the list, I know we've spent a lot of time discussing Power Automate, and that being the constraint for the 1.2. Can we also follow up on Logic Apps? Because they also have the 1.2 constraint, and I think that's a different team.
And what is the issue you're running into there?
It's the same with all of them. So you accept 1.4 in Teams, and you can build a card in 1.4, but the piece that delivers it, I think the only thing that will deliver it at the moment is a bot. So any other method that anybody uses to deliver a message in Teams can't go into 1.4. And I think that status, if you could have you've got, what software supports 1.4, like Outlook and things, if you could have another column that had the mechanism for delivering it and what they support, I imagine that would help a lot of users on the call. Because I know we've spent a tremendous amount of time trying to work out why it wouldn't work. Eventually, we got Teams, and they said it's because Power Automate, Power Virtual Agents, and Logic Apps don't support 1.4. So I think that would save a lot of people time too.
Absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up. And when you talk about the column, you're specifying the one that we have on our GitHub, correct?
Yeah. Well, that kind of shows the end. That shows Teams. I don't know if there's like a delivery mechanism one that you might also consider, because it's like Teams supports 1.4, but to get it into Teams, you can only use a bot. So something that just spells out what version the sort of your main delivery options are. From my perspective, be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Do we have any other questions from anyone or comments on gaps they've experienced? I'm curious to know how you folks are using adaptive cards as well. What brings you to community call?
Can I ask? Sorry, go ahead.
Is there a text block piece in adaptive card that supports multi-line? Because in Power Automate, I'm pulling in the description from planner tasks, and if there's a lot of information in there, they're coming as multi-line. And then in Power Automate, I'm assigning it to a variable, and then I'm spitting that variable out in the adaptive card text block. But because it spans multiple lines, the output, the adaptive card, the post adaptive card in a chatter channel, it fails because of it spans multiple lines. I've been trying a lot of different replace functions in Power Automate to replace the, I guess for lack of better words, the enter or the new line with a /n, but it's not working. So I'm wondering, maybe instead of using text blocks, should I be using something else that can support multi-line?
Text blocks do support multi-line. However, there's a property on text blocks which is called wrap that might be set to false to start with. And if it's set to false, it's not going to wrap. So if you have line breaks, it's just not going to work. But
I have it set to true.
Okay,
wrap
so
true.
I'm very curious. Are we talking? This is a card that you're sending to teams, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, text block wrapping and line breaks with backslash N just definitely works, or is definitely supposed to work. That might be a regression. I can't test on the fly right now, but text block absolutely do support line breaks.
I guess so. The failure is at the Power Automate part, not. I guess it's not in Teams. So when I look at the history of the run, and it shows me the text block, the output is actually text colon and then open quotation, and it has my text and spanning over about 10 lines, and then closing quotation on the 10th line. And I think the fact that inside the adaptive card on that value of text, because it spans so many lines, it's failing. It's my best guess here.
It's difficult to diagnose just like that on the fly here.
Sure.
Does the card ever end up in Teams anyway? Does it not render properly, or won't it even be sent to Teams?
It doesn't send. Power Automate fails with some error that the action iterate through some block failed, and then when I dig deep to it, I can see it's the adaptive card, because I've taken the same block of code for the adaptive card and pasted into the I/O page that's out there, adaptive cards.io, and spanning multiple lines, it fails in there. But then when I remove all the extra new lines and I make it one solid string, one line, it works just fine.
Is there any way you could send that payload so that we can get a chance to, because you're saying that it's also failing to render in the designer on adaptivecards.io, and
yes.
That's also surprising to me, because I was going to say, you said the text spans over 10 lines. It could also be that the size limit when you try to send, when Power Automate tries to send the card to Teams is exceeded, and Teams is refusing it. But if it also does not work in the designer, it's another problem.
Okay. Well, how can I send it to you guys?
The way I made
Andy, do you have access to the chat?
No, I don't see the chat thing. I don't know why. I'm using the client.
Yeah, I don't see the chat either, but silly thought here. Could it be a JSON parsing, or could there be a double quote in that payload as well?
That's what I was thinking. So before I shoot it into the adaptive card beforehand, I've tried a couple replace functions where I tell it to look for a new line and then replace it with the /n. The /n replacement works, but it's still the outputs span in multiple lines.
Right. What I'm saying, though, somewhere in the payload, somebody could have, like you said, this is getting data from somewhere. Could that data be including double quotes in it?
No, there's no double quotes.
That's just a thought.
The way I got around it is.
Have you tried using the multi-line method, how you do in the Markdown language? That's what has worked for me in the past for showing multi-line content in adaptive cards from Flow to Teams. So you might want to give that a try.
Method? No, I'm not familiar with it. What's the method for that?
Just look up Markdown language format and see how multi-lines are applied there. I don't remember on top of my head. Try that and replace that /n with that dot 2 spaces or 3 spaces or something like that. Is a specific format that should work for you. Just give it a try.
The way I got around it is using a split and creating an array for each sentence or each line, and then pasting that into the card, the array itself.
Okay, got it.
These are some interesting workarounds.
Yeah, that seems a little. I mean, you shouldn't have to work around these issues that much.
Absolutely.
There is something going on here. Yeah, it shouldn't be that complicated.
Yeah, I agree. I'd love to share the snippet of code with you guys. There's nothing confidential or sensitive about it, but I don't see the chat window.
Andy, I just added my email to the presentation. I'm not sure if it's getting displayed properly, but feel free to send that JSON payload over and we can follow up through there.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah, there's some interesting workarounds, but I do not think this is expected behavior. So we should definitely look into this.
Just a quick question. Have you tried, when you're saying you've tried with /n, actually would be \n, right?
Right.
The card would show in the designer when you use that, right? On adaptivecards.io, because I'm trying that right now. I mean, I kind of know how it works, but I just checked to be sure. And so \n works, but you have to use 2 of them in a row.
Yes, I have 2 of them. So if you're using it in adaptivecards.io right now, hit enter on your keyboard, have it span multiple lines literally on the screen, use your /ns, and then do that final closing quotation on that 10th line after your last character. And that's where the break happens for me.
Hold on a second. Are you saying that the text is split across multiple lines in the JSON?
Yes.
Oh, but that's
not JSON. It's just it's an incoming variable from Planner. It's the description body of a task from Planner. So I'm using one of Power Automate's actions to get that. I throw it into a variable, and the variable, when I spit it out, it's a giant string that spans multiple lines.
Right, and so how is the adaptive card JSON generated with that value after that? Do you hand generate the JSON? Do you generate that JSON as a string or as an actual JSON object to start with that you then serialize to a string? I'm thinking the problem.
It's not JSON. So again, it's not JSON.
No, the variable is not. But you need to transform that into a card, and a card is JSON.
Yeah. So I have the card because I created the card from your adaptive card site. I have the layout, and I'm putting it inside of the text piece. So it's quotation, text, quotation, colon, and then open quote. I spit out the variable right there. So the variable is assigned right there, close quotes. And when I look at the run history, what it spits out is that variable, it blew up into about 10 lines of a long string.
Here's my guess. As you paste that value into the card's JSON, you're actually breaking the JSON.
Right.
That one string should be on one line, basically, in your editor.
So
if
I get that,
across multiple lines,
I just don't know how to do that.
JSON. Yeah.
That's the part that I'm having an issue with. And that's why I asked the original question if there's something in adaptive cards that can handle, a multi-line string. But going to your point, probably it's breaking the JSON. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, this is really like an issue about valid JSON in the first place. Yeah, in JSON, you cannot split a line of text across multiple lines. That's it.
Gotcha. Okay. So then I gotta figure out how to do that replacement in Power Automate. I'll try some of the suggestions like Markdown and other things.
Right, and of course, let us know if you're successful or not. Right, there might still be an issue on the adaptive card side, but it seems to me that here it's a JSON generation issue.
Okay.
Awesome. Thank you for bringing that up, Andy. Greg, it looks like you have your hand up.
Thanks, JP. This would be for like Steven or David. So for Teams, when the Automate sends it over to Teams, the action.openURL, it is in GitHub, but it was closed. So I just want to see if you guys are actually aware and where it might be in status, because it looks like it might have got pushed over to you guys maybe. But when you put in the mail to, it will work just fine in the adaptive card if you do it in your Android or in your iOS. But when you do it on the desktop, you hit the button, it does nothing.
Interesting. Even I'm going to let you try to answer that if you have a clue. I don't.
Yeah, I think that's the first that I've heard of this. But if it's so you're saying this already has been filed as an issue?
So it was opened on April 15th. It's in GitHub, Microsoft Adaptive Cards. It's MS Teams action.openURL mail to number 5677. The last comment was from WAJEED-MSFT, saying it's been added as a feature request. Engineering teams looking into it. Once the feature is completed, we'll have parity across platforms.
Mm-hmm. And has it been closed since?
It's been closed, but there's been no like update. Like, has Microsoft actually done anything? Because I just tested this out like 2 days ago, and same thing. It's like it works in my Android and iOS just fine, but when I try to hit the button in Teams on the desktop, it doesn't open Outlook. It just, you click the button, it does nothing.
Okay. This is a GitHub issue, you said? Sorry, can you repeat the number again? Yeah.
Yep, it was, so the title, because again, I would chat it, but I even logged out of Teams, logged back into the meeting, and it still didn't give me the chat option. But it's called the MS Teams action.openURL mail to with several recipients, but it doesn't work with one or several in desktop. But it was number 5677.
5677. Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it, guys, because I needed it for something that somebody was asking me for a client, and I was like, "Oh, works fine if I put you to your phone, but I need you to be able to do it on the desktop."
It is Gregory, right? Is it? Yeah.
Yep,
so
yep.
we'll
Craig
take
Craig and Gregory. So got first two names there.
Sounds good. Yeah. So we'll take a look at this. It's interesting that it's been closed. Potentially, what I could see as a fix might be trying to make its way to production on our end. But let me take a closer look at that on the GitHub issue itself. Yeah.
Appreciate it, Stephen.
Yeah. Thanks.
We have someone else with their hand up, but I can't see who it is.
I have my hand up. Am I speaking?
Hi.
Hello. I just started working with the Adaptive Card framework, and I have it's a very simple question, but I have two formats in which I need to make a card visible, and I'm using the isVisible to toggle them. And is there a way to do it so that if my payload has one particular object, I just want to check the conditional existence of that object when I'm setting the isVisible tag? It's just a it's a syntactical code.
You want a conditional toggle visibility? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, conditional toggle. Yeah. So, at the initial, when I load the card, I just want, when I set the first isVisible.
There's no support for conditional things. The card itself needs to be expressed in its initial state.
Okay.
And unless you are displaying the card yourself in your own app and thus have access to can manipulate it in code, there's no way to currently specify a conditional expression to set the initial state.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
I've got a question about adaptive components, which I think you guys have slated for 1.6. Are you able to share any more details about how that feature is sort of grooming out at the moment?
I can take that if unless JP or Raul you want to address, I can address this.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I don't think there's more than what we've shared already. Components, the feature as defined is still what's actually, you can read all about it on GitHub at this point. It's a purely declarative way of creating basically, a shortcut to some little layout and bind it to data on the fly and have the application who's displaying the card dynamically discover those components at runtime. So there's no additional information. Is there something in particular that you're looking for, or any request or suggestion you wanted to make?
One of the reasons for asking the question is we actually do exactly what the adaptive component, we solve the problem that adaptive components solves at the moment, and we do it in code. So we include snippets of layouts we save them as other templates or other cards, and we then include them into a master card at the time that we have some coding that puts the card together. And just understanding how that feature is going to develop more will help for us to decide how far we push that roadmap item for us.
Right. So, I mean, indeed, it seems that what you've been doing so far is very, very similar to the result that we want to accomplish. But yeah, we don't have any more information. The spec has not evolved since the last time it was discussed here. So you can still refer to it on GitHub. I think you just look for adaptive components and the proposal is there. I'm gonna double check.
And David, would you see these being used to create essentially like people like Microsoft would create components like, say, an email component, and then I could include the email component in a broader card on a person, for example?
So
is that really the goal?
The primary goal for this is that authoring a card is still not as easy as we necessarily want it to be, right? Especially when you start doing some relatively complex layouts that make use of column set and whatnot. When you want an image on the right and text on the left, text on the right that wraps correctly, all of that takes time, and we've found that sometimes it can be very repetitive. And we've seen also across plenty of scenarios, basically the same layouts being used over and over again. So instead of asking everybody to recreate those sub layouts, if you wish, we were thinking, what if we made it possible to have those layouts readily available to anybody who wants to use them? This way, everybody would have the same consistent layout across all applications. We could author those things to make sure that they look fantastic. And so that's kind of the main use case. Okay. Now, the example that you cited, an email, yeah, potentially we could have one of those that is meant to represent an email, and we'd make sure that given the subject, the recipients, and the body of an email, we would output something that looks good and that can be reused across the board without you having to make any effort as to producing that layout. That's the idea.
Makes sense.
And I think something that's interesting as well is we just said Microsoft would produce those layouts. Given that the component spec is entirely based on a declarative approach, again, it is very possible, and I hope it will happen for that matter, that we'll make it possible for third parties like you potentially to contribute to the collection of components that are available online. And in that case, that collection is going to grow hopefully very quickly, and everybody's going to benefit from whatever everybody else is contributing to the registry. So we'll see what happens.
Thank you. That's very useful.
Awesome. It looks like we have Alexander up next.
Yeah, thank you. Hi, everyone. I was not able to join the call from the start, so I missed the slide number 3. If you can go back.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I also have a question regarding the components, some kind of timeline or a roadmap, or when the version 1.6 would be available, and also if components are still slated for 1.6, or maybe there is a chance to move them further in the future.
I think they're still slated for 1.6, but as you can see on the slide, 1.5 is going to be in preview in September, meaning that it's likely that it won't ship until the end of September, maybe October. So that means that 1.6 is going to come after that. And I don't think we have a timeline at this point. But JP, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
No problem. I was going to say the same thing. We don't have a fixed date for 1.6 yet.
Okay, and also one info, we completed the POC and on also the extensibility of the editor based on the issue that was available there. So maybe at some point in time, maybe we can demo this if somebody is interested. So now we are able to take the existing editor and add custom components that are showing up in the all different places where needed in the editor. So
editor, you mean designer, correct?
Yeah, designer, yeah.
Yeah, I think it'd be great to see a demo at some point.
Okay.
All right. And we have Pawan.
Hey guys, I think my question was, along the lines of previously asked, is the extensibility of adaptive cards to create like custom components. So the use case is like, say, we are a telephony company and we want to build our own phone dialer, right? Can we build, like, create a custom dialer or like a phone icon, which can be added by other party just to, so these are kind of components we want to build to suffice our customer base and stuff. Is that something which is possible or even thought about, like customizing components in Adaptive Cards?
It kind of depends on one thing. Is your intent to create custom components and for those custom components to show in cards displayed in Teams and other Microsoft applications, or using those components in your own apps? Because in your own apps, no problem. In Teams, it doesn't work, or any Microsoft property. The Teams sticks to the core Adaptive Card schema, so does Outlook. We don't add support for custom components. That's just not a possibility at this point in time.
Understood. I'm just more towards the latter part, which is our own installing in our own applications.
Yeah, that you can totally do. Like you can do anything you want. A custom element is basically your own code running and translating into something being displayed within the card, and you can do whatever you want.
Okay. Is there any specific rule sets we need to follow or something, or do you guys have any documentation or something which I could use referral, or is just fork the code from GitHub and just go ahead?
So we have an explicit page on AdaptiveCards.io's documentation around extensibility. Actually, we have several pages, one for each SDK. So I don't know what SDK you're really looking at right now, if it's JavaScript, if it's iOS, Android, or whatnot. But you have examples over there. On the JS side, there is a full example of how to create a custom element, how to implement it, how to register it with the SDK. So you can start from there. I think there's the equivalent for iOS and Android as well. So you don't need to fork the code or whatnot. Obviously, if you look at the code, if you're ready to do that, it can help understanding how it's done, but you shouldn't have to.
And Pawan, I'm not sure if you're able to see the chat, but Rashik on our team just pasted out the link for accessibility.
Says you, yeah, I can see the chat.
Perfect.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you. Do we have any other questions? Go ahead.
Just one more quick thing is that, yeah, we are launching Adaptive Cards within, so RingCentral is using Adaptive Cards. So we are launching it for a larger audience, and it's been great how we could build cards using Adaptive Cards. I just want to give a thanks to you guys for building such an amazing platform.
No, thank you.
Awesome.
We're glad to hear that you're launching it on your side as well.
Yeah, I've got a couple of simple questions to ask, if that's okay. I'm using the Microsoft Teams connector for Adaptive Cards, and one of the options in there is update message. There don't appear to be any formatting options for that. Is that correct?
Steven, think you can address that?
The formatting options for messages in Adaptive Cards?
Yeah, it's particularly the update message option that we get in the connector when the user responds to the card.
I see. So when users respond, is the response directly on the card itself?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
That's the button. Yeah.
I see. So I believe you mean providing a formatted response back to a card?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So that's a feature that we're actually working on in the later part of this quarter. So yeah, that feature is currently not in at the moment, where right now responses are limited to just clear text. But eventually we're going to be implementing a rich text editor for Adaptive Cards within Teams, which would enable those scenarios.
That'd be great. Yeah. I've got one other question, which is there are two other options. There's summary and is alert. They don't seem to do anything. Am I missing something?
Okay, these are flags in the Adaptive Cards?
Presumably.
Okay. Yeah, that one I'm not too familiar with, but I believe so. It's not currently in the documentation. Is that correct?
Yeah. No, it's not there.
Okay.
And those would not be Adaptive Card features, right? This is not part of the Adaptive Card schema. So I'm not. Is this a Teams thing? It's like as you respond to an action from a card. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, it's one of the attributes in the connector. for Microsoft Teams. Sorry, for Power Automate.
Yeah, I'm not. Unfortunately, I'm not familiar enough. I don't. I can't. I can't answer that question. So you said the warning. Which of the two?
One's called Summary.
Summary.
And the other is Alert.
And is Alert. And
yes,
what are they supposed to do? Again, very sorry to not be.
What are they supposed to do? That's my question, to be honest. They don't seem to do anything.
So these flags are set on the Power Automate side?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think we may have to choose.
And his alert is yes or no.
Okay. Yeah, I think this might be something we need to reach out to the Power Automate team to know exactly what's going on. But as far as I know, so currently, like it's not inhibiting anything, right? It's just confusion as far as what these flags are doing.
Yep. Yeah. As I say, I just thought I was missing something, but obviously not.
Yeah. Yeah. We'd have to look into it, but yeah. Sorry. Apologies for that. Let's get back to you when we have an answer on that.
Yeah, it can't be that exciting anyway. But thanks. That's great.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Bill. Andy.
I had another question about in an adaptive card and the actions. Is there a way to set up an action that writes back to a SharePoint list? I would think, I'm not sure if your buttons can do it, but I would think some kind of API call back to SharePoint that can support a body. So in that body digest, we can write back whatever the user's click action that they may have done in the card.
Well, that you do in your bot, right?
So it's not a bot that I'm working on. I mean, I possibly could in a bot aspect, but this is going back to the example I was giving you guys earlier, is that in Power Automate, I'm shooting off a card to Teams, and I want to give them the ability to click a button that will write to a SharePoint list.
All right, so I suppose that, and again, I'm no expert here when it comes to Power Automate. I probably need to learn a little bit more, but typically you would have an action in your card encoded so that when it's clicked, it would trigger a new activity in Power Automate, like the next step, if you wish, and that next step would have to somehow be configured as, an action, as something that posts to SharePoint based on the data payload received from the card. So I'm imagining it's probably not too hard to accomplish, for as long as posting to SharePoint is a type of activity that's available in Power Automate, but there's no. What I can tell you is for sure is that there is no explicit direct way to encode an action in adaptive card so that it posts to SharePoint.
Okay.
And it looks like we were getting some thumbs up from Dan. Maybe you had some more info on this, Dan?
Oh yeah, I think what you were describing is exactly right. That wherever that response goes, where that hook comes back to, you can do whatever you want with it. You might have some limitations on concurrency and Power Automate in particular, but you can take that and update a list or write something to Dataverse or wherever it is that you want to go from that. So we do that quite a bit. It works pretty consistently.
Perfect. Thanks for sharing that.
Can I just, while I get my mute off, maybe a quick question. You may have answered this a dozen times before in other calls, but relative to going through sort of the certification of process for third-party approvals for adaptive cards to show up like in Outlook to an external tenant, is that like, I tried that pretty early on as that process came on. Do you know if that's evolved any since, or if there's any words of wisdoms or resources there that might help sort of extend adaptive cards into further outside of the internal ecosystem?
So the approval process for actionable messages in Outlook is what you're referring to. Is that correct?
Yeah, so when you want to send an adaptive card to somebody else's inbox, the approval process you have on the developer side there seemed really, like, there are a lot of places I got stuck in. I'm just wondering if that's changed, or if you've got some good guidance or resources there so that we can start externalizing adaptive cards.
Now, as far as I know, that process is the same as what it was last month and probably last year. there is a dashboard that you're probably already familiar with, where you have to register your scenario, choose your scope. Then this goes through our approval process. We have a team that happens to be in India. They go through your scenario, they test it, they validate it, and then they approve it. And then at that point, you're free to actually send your actionable messages to, I assume, to the global. And that's the way it works. Yes, there is one email address that you might be OAM on board. I think it's called at Microsoft.com.
I don't think I know that. All right, I'll give that a try. And it was, you know, at the time they had some questions that didn't even really seem to make sense to me, and I just sort of gave up at the time and thought, well, you know, it's new. I'll come back and look at it again. So I thought, while I had my mic open, I would see if that's evolved at all, because I think, as great as it is to use this inside of Teams, et cetera, I think to be able to take some of that automation and power of that and put it into an email to create sort of automation in that way, I think is going to be just incredibly powerful and really lower the bar. I'll call it the collaboration through email, through quick response, quick actions. I think it's just a tremendous use cases. So I'm excited to see that.
I can't disagree with that. Yeah, so the email address is onboard.oam. I pasted it in the chat in case you want to refer, but any issue that you have, the guidance is you send an email to there. If you already have a provider registered, you can paste a link to that provider and they can take it from there.
Okay, that's great. I really appreciate that. And real quick, and I think I've seen this somewhere else, but just to confirm, what's sort of the cadence of when where teams, like how far behind will teams be from the GA or of what it accepts in terms of the latest adaptive card version? Like, where does that, like, what should our expectations be there? Is it, you know, 1 or 2 minor revs behind, or is it something different than that, or does it just kind of depend on how significant the changes are from one version to the next as you continue down the roadmap?
Steven, do you want to address that?
Yeah, I think that's right. We don't have a very clear answer on that. Usually it does depend on how significant the changes are, but that is also something that we're actively trying to reduce the churn on, is just trying to close that gap on delays between updates on new AC versions and what's available on Teams.
Yeah, that'd be great. Or even just some guidance or consistency there. It just gets difficult as we're trying to, you know, obviously we're always, as all of us on this call, I'm sure, excited about the latest features and just the richness that you bring to it. And then at the same time, we've got to figure out where that development path leads as we look at sort of where else these cards are getting deployed. So just some guidance there so that we can set expectations. And as we're doing our own product planning and road mapping, we kind of know when to ship those resources from, you know, one environment to, say, back to the Teams environment to take advantage of those latest releases. So that'd be helpful just to see, you know, even just some general guidance there. And it may not be possible until there's, you know, until the feature set is just sort of a different level of maturity, but that would be helpful.
Yeah, definitely. And I think these community calls are always an avenue for us to announce these as well ahead of time. So hopefully this helps
hugely
with all of your planning. Yeah.
Hugely helpful. Yeah.
All right. Great to hear.
Up next, we have Sean.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I just wanted to pretty much second a lot of that. This is the biggest thing as far as like where I am in my org. Everybody works in email, and I'm just waiting for adaptive cards like the Teams and Outlook to kind of sync. I know it's coming. I'm excited for it, and that's pretty much it there. Just like thinking, happy about it.
No, yeah, thanks for sharing that. So a little bit of context here. I joined the team not too long ago, along with Raul, and I think one of the most impactful things I saw right when joining the team was the power that Outlook offers with actionable messages and how they prevent that context switching that someone has to do and lose that focus time. So I think that that's something, an area that our team is focusing on as well, and I totally agree. And perfect. It looks like we have 2 more minutes. Any last minute questions that someone would have? We can take one more.
Yeah, I wanted to mention real quick. I realized that the link that I sent in the email so that you could access the chat didn't work. We are gonna go and figure out how we can get you access. And we should have an update for you by the next community call as well.
Yeah, apologies everyone for that. That form that Robo created was an attempt to get everyone access to the chat, but it didn't seem to work this time. Next time we'll have a solution for that.
I'd love to hear how you end up doing it, because we run into similar issues where we're trying to get people onto chat, and it seems to be a big mystery on what doesn't work. So if you crack the code and could share that sort of on the Teams front, that'd be great to understand what you do to make that work.
So I actually found out that this meeting was set up it was set up a while ago, and I think it was a one-time meeting in 2020, and we're just going on the same meeting over and over again. So I'm not able to add new people to it. So the link that you have is a short link, and I think we'll just change the underlying meeting to make it recurring, and I think that should fix the thing. But we'll keep you updated.
Yeah, thanks. And good luck.
Thank you guys for everything. Taking notes, listening to the power users. Appreciate it all. JP, Steven, I did email you both the URL for the GitHubs. That way you guys should see that here shortly. That way you got that to reference to. So, but again, appreciate everything, listening to all of us, because we got users and clients that we want to try to meet their needs too. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you guys. Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you all for attending this. It's really helpful just hearing the different scenarios that you guys are having.